for me, I feel like anytime I've included opportunities for students to create multimodal text, it's been a way to help scaffold the learning and for them to see how what they come in with can help them, in fact, um, master whatever it is that needs to be the output of the course, but at the same time, and not at the expense of leaving out their sense of identity or their sense of who they are and replacing their language and their forms of representation, but just seeing how they could use all of those tools together. When I work with students, international students, when I invite them to use and to create multimodal text, it becomes less scary to articulate and to become part of the community. Um, and they can represent their meaning more fully. But then in time, that's also helping to scaffold. Like, I just need to get the ideas out. And then later, I could figure out how to turn it into the paper or whatever output is needed. But sometimes there isn't just the right word to explain that in the process of learning. So I think the use of multimodal text, like not just in terms of teaching resources, but for students to be able to generate that, is really helpful in working with diverse groups of students. So probably one of the more interesting instances or examples that I could give in thinking about the use of multimodality, creating multimodal text, and relating that to the kind of work that we do in schools, where the emphasis is often in more traditional principles of composition and very traditional conceptualizations of what counts as literacy, what counts as literate practices, right? So I teach a research methods module, which if you think about that in itself, like, you don't think probably of using multimodal text, because research, the way it's represented, the publications, very much emphasize writing and that very particular reading path of left to right, top to bottom. So in my courses online, I often, one of the challenges, one of the most difficult things I think to teach is critical reading, critical analysis. And one of the ways that I achieve that is by having students develop multimodal text before they go into the writing. So I'll explain further. At one point in the course, we learn about different research methods and possibly which methods would suit the topic and the research questions that they've selected. So what we do is we break down into smaller groups, and the students would research different methods, read about it, and part of their task is to take what they've learned, which is very technical and very specific language, and they have to represent it multimodally. So this could be the use of PowerPoint. It could be the use of Prezi. It could be a video, and they could bring other suggestions as they see fit. But the prompt is, I want you to take what you've learned about the particular method, and it has to fit. If it's a video, within 2 minutes. If it's a PowerPoint slide, no more than 2 slides. And so it teaches synthesis and critical analysis. And if you think about if you've ever had to instruct a course or a group of people or do some form of training, when the situation is flipped and you're not the student and you're the one giving the instruction, it really demands that you know the material and not just summarize it, but have a deeper understanding of it. So by doing that process of having them create the multimodal text, they're learning to understand the concepts and synthesize it, and being able to express it in more plain everyday language, so that by the time they get through writing about it and justifying in their proposals why they're going to use this particular method, they have a deeper understanding of it than if we just went straight to read about it, now insert it in your proposal. So I think there's something that happens when you ask them to do a multimodal representation, and they start to think about how the words that you use, the images that you use, the font, the color, all of that feeds into helping you understand and design and create a very particular meaning. And in turn, that starts to transfer in other ways when they start to write. They may not have the mode of color once they write that proposal, but by that point, the different understandings that they've come to terms with through that process of multimodal design becomes apparent once they start to articulate it and voice their ideas in writing.